You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Phil.
What's up, Dr. Phil?
Good morning. How's everybody?
You're moving slow this morning, man. You tired? They dragging you around?
Well, I'm on West Coast time, so this is like I don't go to sleep until like 3 a.m., so then you get up with 3 hours sleep, and I'm old.
Yeah. 17 seasons of the Dr. Phil show.
Yeah.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks.
And re-up till 2023.
That's right.
Wow.
We just signed up for some more.
Do you ever look at them and say, man, do I have to do press? I mean, god dang, they know it's on. They know where to find it.
No, I like getting out and talking to people. Mm-hmm. I really do. I don't like doing it at 6 o'clock in the morning for like the Today Show or something, but this is pretty civilized here.
Got you.
Well, right now you are on fire with this girl, Treasure, that you had on the show, that is a black girl who says that she's white.
Now, Charlamagne gave a donkey today. Have you ever heard donkey today?
Do you even remember who that is, Dr. Phil?
I do remember this Treasure girl.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. She drove me crazy.
Did you believe anything that was coming out of her mouth?
When you get somebody that is that radical, the first thing you do is think, is this a put on?
Right.
But before we have somebody on, we do a deep dive on these people before they ever get on. And this mother was desperate. And what happened is this girl was adopted, and her mother did not tell her. Her father was a white guy. Her stepfather was a white guy. He died, and when he died, Mom said, oh, by the way, that was your stepdad. You're not biracial. Your real dad is black. And she was like, what? Because she just had no idea. And at that same time, they moved out of the suburbs and into the city, and her whole life changed, and she freaked out.
They must have beat her ass every day in school.
That's why I was working so hard on it. Like, girl, come on. You are a racist. You need to shut up.
Yeah.
And I brought in a life coach for her. You probably saw the wonderful lady out of Atlanta that's a really, really talented and delightful life coach for her. But she's a hard hit. I'm afraid she's going to really get her ass beat. Seriously.
Hey, Dr. Phil, do you believe somebody can be transracial?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you identify with what you grow up with, what you learn, what all of your cultural cues are, everything that you identify with. That's your identity. It's not your genetics. It's your identity.
Tell that to the police when they pulling her black ass over.
Exactly. And and her best friend is black, and she's saying all of these racial things. And what about your best friend?
She's really racist. Then
I said,
all racists say my best friend is black.
Yeah. I said, I asked her, is your best friend watching this? You trashing everybody, and then everybody but her. I'm like, you're a very confused young lady.
Sounds like some trauma in her life, though, that has her from what happened on the show and what we learned about her. Her backstory does sound like something's like triggered. It might be something mental.
Yeah, there's something mental, and it is trauma. I mean, first off, I think her mother made a real mistake not being straight up with her. Then she lost her lifestyle and her father, and then this news all at the same time, and she's very confused. Plus, she's very entitled and very immature. So all that together.
Well, that is a lot of white people do feel entitled.
Yeah, we just did a show on
white
privilege. Yeah.
One more thing about the Treasure Girl. Do you feel like y'all was exploiting her for ratings? Because she is 16. Her prefrontal cortex isn't truly developed yet.
He just learned that word, Dr. Phil. He said it 9 times
He's
today.
been using that word all day.
Her prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until she's at least 25. You feel like y'all was exploiting her a little for ratings?
No, I don't think we exploited her for ratings. And by the way, people ask me that sometimes about a given show or whatever. Ratings means ad rates, right? That's set before the season ever starts.
Talk your talk, Dr. Phil. We don't need that.
And we've been on 17 years, so what I do with one guest or another doesn't change a damn thing one way or another. And if I get down to where I got to throw somebody under the bus for ratings, I don't need to do this at all. let alone throw somebody under the bus. And we spend a lot of time protecting kids.
And really trying to help people.
Now, Doc, have you ever, as a young boy, have you ever thought about changing, you wanted to be a different race?
Never occurred to me.
No, never wanted to be black.
No. How about you? How about
He said, how about
Have
you,
you never wanted to be
Dominican?
black?
Have you ever wanted to be black? Huh?
I am black, Dr. Phil. I am black.
You talked about the white privilege panel, the deconstructing white privilege panel. Why is it so hard for white people to understand their privilege?
To understand white privilege?
Yes.
Because they think it's an individual thing and they get defensive and start saying, I didn't do anything wrong. They don't get the fact that white privilege does not have anything to do with their doing something specifically wrong. They think it's all about them personally taking some unfair advantage, and that's not what it's about. It's about the fact that this is what inures to people that are not of color, that they don't consciously choose, they don't consciously create. It's white privilege if you can walk down the street and people, three of you walk down the street and somebody walking towards you not cross over to the other side because they're afraid something's going to happen. They don't realize that even happens, but it does. They don't realize they can walk into a restaurant and a white woman reach down and snap her purse shut. They don't realize that doesn't happen when they walk in, but it does happen when you walk in.
Why? Because I got a hoodie on?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a pretty good looking hoodie, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't get that. They don't get that when you're white, you get a 40% longer interview for a job than you do if you're of color.
Really?
They don't realize that if you're of color, people sit 24% further away from you during that interview than if you're white. They don't realize those things happen because it doesn't show it. They don't feel it.
Mm-hmm. When did you recognize your own white privilege?
When I started studying it a long time ago, in college, back in my master's program and doctoral program, we started looking at those things then. So I got sensitized to it and started studying it.
There was an old clip from Donald Trump where he said that black people have more advantages than white people because of like affirmative action and things like that. So if he could come back, he would be a black man. It was an old clip though. But why do some white people think black people have more privilege than them? Because
they're idiots. That's idiotic. It's an idiotic thing to say. I mean, that's just simply not true. They don't have more privileges because there's a historical momentum in terms of educational opportunity and the things that we just talked about with regard to white privilege that they simply don't know because they haven't had to climb that steeper hill because things that flowed their direction. Let me tell you, that just would not. He wouldn't say that if he walked that path very long.
You know what's so interesting? I always ask white people. I say, how are you using your privilege to combat prejudice? You actually got a whole list on how to combat white privilege.
Yeah, I think. Only thing you can do, this is, when I started the show 17 years ago, people asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, one of the things I'm going to do is I want to talk about the silent epidemics in America. And that's one of the silent epidemics in America.
Epidemics?
Epidemics
in
America.
What's on your mind?
Yeah. See where he's headed. Just like domestic violence and mental illness. I mean, there's a whole lot of silent epidemics in America. That's one of them.
I wanted to ask, you did a show on ADD, and we talk about mental illness a lot. Do you feel like some of that is a fad, and people are just using that as excuses for things?
Well, ADD is what I call a wastebasket diagnosis.
What do you mean?
It's, when I was growing up, that kid was an out-of-control brat. Okay, now, since we have ADD and ADHD, it has become a wastebasket diagnosis. Anytime a kid is misbehaving, he's ADD or ADHD.
And I hate it.
So let's throw Ritalin at him. And it is so overdiagnosed, it is absolutely unbelievable. And so they throw Ritalin at him, which is a stimulant. Mm-hmm. Because if you got ADD or ADHD, it means that you're underactive in your brain, and so it's not suppressing and inhibiting behavior. So they give a stimulant to activate the brain. If it's already activated, now you just send a kid climbing up the wall.
Right.
It's the worst thing you can possibly do. It's overdiagnosed, and it's a wastebasket diagnosis, and they just take all kids that are misbehaving and throw them into that one diagnosis and give them Ritalin and send them out the door. But medicine is a high-volume business, And so it's easier to write a script than it is to figure out what's really going on.
Yeah, they tried to put me on Ritalin in middle school, and my father was like, he don't need no Ritalin, he just need his ass kicked.
Yeah, well,
Now, you might have needed Ritalin, bro.
yeah.
And an ass kicking.
Now, we first were introduced to
Hold
the
on, what you about to
cast.
say, Doc?
You didn't take Ritalin, did you?
No, I know.
Oh, okay.
I was going to ask about mental illness as well. It seems like a lot of people are talking about mental illness, and if something's wrong, that's the first thing. I'm mentally ill. What do you think about that as well?
Well, look, it can certainly be an excuse. And, when I finished my doctoral program, I spent a year, I did a year's postdoctoral fellowship in forensic psychology. And so I've spent a lot of time in the legal system, and I see it used as an excuse an awful lot. But I don't want that to keep people from talking about mental illness, because what I've tried to do is push mental illness, mental health to the forefront of the narrative in America, because I don't want people to be ashamed about talking about mental illness. I hate to see people misuse it,
Right.
because I want people to feel free to talk about mental illness in America, anxiety, depression. People need to talk about that and not feel alone, not feel ashamed, not hide it, get rid of the stigma for mental illness. Because to me, if you've got a mental illness, it is an illness, just like if you had diabetes or a kidney infection or a knee problem, whatever. It shouldn't have any more stigma than any other disease.
I just found out that anxiety was a mental illness, because I suffer from anxiety. But I didn't put it under the mental illness category until I found out this year by going to therapy.
What did you think it was? What did you think was happening?
I just thought it was anxiety. Like before, I got diagnosed 9 years ago with actual anxiety, because I used to have all these panic attacks. So that's when I realized, okay, this is a thing called anxiety. But I didn't realize it went under the mental illness umbrella. When I thought mental illness, I thought bipolar and stuff like that. I didn't know anxiety was.
Yeah, anxiety is. I'm glad that they labeled that for you so you could understand, because a lot of people feel that it's a weakness, like some kind of weakness that you can't handle it, or the stress is getting to you and it makes you mentally weak, or that you're just not strong, you're not a man, you're not whatever. And that's just absolutely not true. Mm-hmm. This is a neurologically based situation, and oftentimes it can be 80% neurological and 20% psychological. You just don't know till you get in and figure it out. Because there's an amygdala part of the brain where it's kind of like a recorder, and it's where you record all of the bad things that have happened, all the bad memories, and it's like a racetrack without an exit ramp. And so you get going around on that racetrack, and it just builds up anxiety because it goes over and over and over in your mind.
Exactly.
And we talk 125 words a minute, but we think between 12 and 1,400 words a minute. So you can say something that is scary or hear something that's scary, but you can repeat it 10 times faster. So all during the day, you're saying that stuff to yourself, and it just goes over and over in your head, and you just scare the hell out of yourself.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're dealing with it, and I'm glad you're talking about it. By the way,
I just wrote a book about it.
I know you did, and that is a great thing to do, because a lot of people pay attention to you, they look up to you, and they say, okay, if he can acknowledge that and deal with it, then I can. And they don't feel alone, and they don't feel that there's some kind of inferior person, because they admire you and say, if you can deal with it, they can deal with it, and you will cause people to come out and be willing to talk about that and reach out for help and not feel like they're alone.
Have you ever dealt with it?
Not anxiety. Mm-hmm. That's something that, well, that's not true. Everybody has it to some degree, but if it gets to be a pattern, and if it gets to be prolonged into weeks or months, then people need to seek help for it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, we were first introduced to the Cast Me Outside girl on your show, and since then she's signed a record deal and everybody knows who she is. Do you keep in contact with her, and what do you think about everything that she's done since then?
I do not keep in contact with her, and
Are you ashamed about that, Dr. Phil?
I wish her nothing but the best, but I think that's a very dysfunctional situation.
Yeah.
I really think that's a very dysfunctional situation. When she came on, she was really misbehaving and having some problems, and we sent her to a really great place called Turnabout Ranch, and it's a really wonderful place. It's a real working ranch, and she really got away from her attitude, and she started participating. She actually took a leadership position with a lot of girls there and was just doing terrific. And she got home, and she got back into that environment, and it just all came unraveled. And somehow or another, they've turned it into a cash cow.
Yeah.
And so I suppose there's a silver lining in that regard. But
I think that encourages the negative behavior.
The money.
Yeah.
Like, it might make
And the
people want to
fame.
come on the show and act up because they think they'll get famous
yeah.
from that.
And, we sensed that a few times. She came back for a follow-up visit.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came back for the follow-up visit, they were backstage. I had them walk out. They sat down. They turned around and looked, and I had no audience at all. I emptied the building. There was no audience there. And the mother was stunned. Like, where is everybody? I said, well, you don't need an audience. You're just here to follow up and continue the progress with your daughter, right? What do you need an audience for? And she didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do, and was very huffy about the whole thing, because at that point I thought she had flipped into trying to play to the audience. So I emptied the whole building, had not one person in the audience.
So how do you feel about people rewarding her with things like record deals and such?
Well, first off, she may have some talent. I don't know.
No, she doesn't.
But I think they are rewarding bad behavior, and I think her mother is rewarding bad behavior, and I think that's terrible. I think it's absolutely terrible.
With that said, and I fall under this category too, do you think we reward bad behavior? Like if I talk about them on The Breakfast Club or you bring them on Dr. Phil's show, is that rewarding bad behavior?
Well, I think it's rewarding bad behavior if in some way, if her currency is attention to misbehaving, and you pay attention to that, you edify that, you lift that up, then that's rewarding bad behavior. And so, yeah, I think that is empowering her, giving her a platform to run on.
Are we seeing the effects of social media in this younger generation now? Because now it seems like social media is actually the cause for a lot of this. It's the cause of people wanting to be famous and wanting to make a lot of money. And
It's also the cause of depression.
it's also the cause of depression and a lot of negative stuff as well.
Well, social media I think the internet's good and bad. And I'll tell you what I think. I think young people have great knowledge about the internet. I've got an 8-year-old granddaughter that can order a car on the internet. I mean, boy, the zip, 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 zip.
Why does the 8-year-old granddaughter have money for a car?
Yeah, can she
Dr.
get
Phil?
one?
She doesn't. That's the only reason she doesn't have one.
Okay.
But she knows how to click here, go there, go. She knows how to move around the internet. And a lot of kids have the knowledge to use it, but they don't have the wisdom.
Right.
I mean, a high percentage of kids are in contact with a predator within 2 hours of being on the internet. The predators are just, they're like Jaws, just swimming around out there looking for these kids, and they get them, and they talk them out their bedroom windows in the middle of the night, and I deal with it time after time.
Wow.
So it is a scary terrain, and it is unmonitored, and that's a problem. But my generation, we can see around the corners, but we don't know. Most parents don't know that game controllers, they think their kid's in there just playing Mario Brothers or something. They don't understand that game controller has access to the internet, that they can be back there talking to somebody on the internet
Absolutely.
with that game controller. They don't even know that.
Right.
So they don't know that their child can be getting groomed while they think they're playing a video game.
Right.
And so the kids have the knowledge but not the wisdom, and that's the problem. And I've seen kids that commit suicide because they don't get enough likes for their pictures, right, or somebody is bullying them on the internet. When I was growing up, you got bullied at school, you got bullied on the bus docks, you got bullied on the playground. But you went home, you were away from it.
It was over.
But now it follows you home. You can
24/7.
change schools. It follows you to the next school because they've still got their hooks in you on the internet. And that's a terrible thing.
Now, you mentioned bullying, and, I'm sure when you were a kid, you got into a fight or two with a bully. I'm sure. Maybe. Yes. No.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You seem like a bully type a little bit, Dr. Phil.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Were you a bully in school?
I was not. I was so skinny. You wouldn't think it looking at me now, but I was pretty skinny and gangly. I was knees and elbows and noodle neck.
Got you.
But the reason I ask is when I was a kid and it was a bully, you stood up to the bully, and usually it went away. Now it seems like they're telling these kids to, tell a teacher, and which I guess is good. But then when you leave school, there's no teacher there anymore.
Yeah.
And these kids are really dealing with these problems, and it seems like nowadays they don't want kids to have, I want to say, an altercation or to deal with it themselves. What do you think about that for parents trying to raise their kids in this era?
I think parents make a big mistake when they say, well, this is just kids, let it work it out among themselves. To a degree, kids are kids, you let them work it out among themselves. But when a kid's getting bullied, the last thing in the world they need is to be left alone, where they feel like they got nobody.
I agree.
And I was invited to come to Congress to testify when they were doing reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act because they were concerned about cyberbullying, and I was petitioning them to reallocate funds to deal with cyberbullying, because if you don't put money behind it in the curriculum, it's not going to change. You can talk about it, jaw jack all you want, but if you don't put money behind it, it is not going to change. And so I was wanting them to do, and they did. They did put money behind it, because the teachers were saying, oh, that's happening off campus, so we can't do anything about it. And I just said that's not right. It's your group. They're your kids. It's your class. Mm-hmm. And that's the social group. And the fact that it's happening off campus, you need to go off campus if that's necessary. It's happening in your sociogram. You need to deal with it. And that's beginning to change, where they do hold them accountable if it's happening in their class, whether it happens at school or whether it happens at home. So I think parents need to monitor where their kids are going on the internet, and they need to make damn sure they know what's happening.
Is that a healthy way to do social media? Because, I'm joking, but when we say the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, like it makes people compulsive and impulsive. Like, is there a healthy way for a kid to do it, or should they not be on it at all?
Well, first off, I think they should be limited in the amount of time they spend on it, because they can get addicted to this, right?
Yeah.
Where it's all they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to walk around with kids whose necks are bent down forward because everybody's looking at their phones. And think about how much that has changed. When I started Dr. Phil, and I'm not talking about myself in the third person, it's not called the Dr. Phil Show, it's just called Dr. Phil. When I started, the first text had not been sent. There were no smartphones. Mm-hmm. There was no Facebook. That was 17 years ago. None of this even existed then. Yeah. And now it is totally defining our society, and people are completely consumed by it. And parents need to limit the kids' access to it. They may not be able to limit where they go on it because they're not adept enough at the technology, but they can limit the amount of time they're on it. Make them put it down and go outside. You know what? The sun's shining. Throw the ball around, break a sweat, do something, put it down and go outside. There's more than the virtual world. There's a real world. Get out there and deal with your friends.
I think even with technology, they're trying to limit that too by having kids' phones shut off after a certain amount of hours and all of that. They have all these things that they can do now for parents to make sure that their kids can't be on their phones and tablets all the time.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know they'd shut them down. So I guess that's good. But if the kids,
they're holding them accountable too. Like Apple's accountable for making sure that these kids have less access.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, because if they don't, they'll get bored and go outside.
Right. What is that? What do you think that unattainable picture of perfection social media is painting is doing to kids?
I think it really causes them to compare themselves. Kids don't understand that when you see a selfie from Kim Kardashian or somebody, they don't understand. Just like reality shows, they don't understand these reality shows have 16 writers on their staff. There ain't nothing reality about a reality show. Mm-hmm. They got a whole writing staff. They don't understand that. They don't understand when they see that selfie that it's been photoshopped after taking 700 different pictures. And so they compare themselves to that fantasy.
Right. Mm.
Nobody looks like that. I drive down Sunset every day going to the studio, and I look at these billboards up there. you see that you see these young people, boys and girls, on these billboards, and they're 15, 16 years old. They don't really look like that. If you looked at them in real life, you couldn't pick her out of a lineup. She doesn't look like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the young people don't know that, so they compare their reality to that fantasy, and they come out on the short end of the stick, and so they feel terrible.
You know, we talk about Cash Me Outside Girl. We talk about
No, you talk about Cash Me Outside.
you created that monster, Dr. Phil.
Thank you, Dr. Phil.
We talk about her. We talk about Treasure. What does Oprah think about all of this? What does Oprah think about this ratchet shit you doing, Dr. Phil?
Well, you have to ask Oprah about that.
She never talked to you about it?
I talk to her all the time.
What does she say?
You know, she and I are really good friends, and so we, both having been down this path, we talk about the frustrations and all the things, and we tend to both shake our heads at the same time, like, oh God, because some of the things that come out of what you do, you go, wow, I'm really proud of that. Other times you just go, oh God, that was not the intended outcome. But you take the good with the bad.
Because some things just go viral, right? You might do 1,000 shows, and then the couple of things that go really viral and get huge might be those ones that are more ratchet.
Yeah. We put videos up from our show. We do clips and stuff like that. Last year we had 1.8 billion views of videos from the Dr. Phil show. That's a lot of views.
Did you send Cash Me Outside Girl a present?
No, and she was a fraction of the views that were out there. So the majority of them are people that are actually looking for information about anxiety, depression, marriage, parenting, things like that. And then every once in a while you get something like that pops up. But in the main, people are generally looking for information to make their lives better.
Can I ask you a question about a story we reported on up here?
Sure.
And what your view is on it, since we talked about bullying earlier, right? There was a father whose son was being bullied in school, and they're 8 years old, and he actually ended up sitting down with the bully, talking to the mom, talking to the bully, and finding out that he actually was being bullied himself. He was homeless, he didn't have clean clothes, he didn't have new shoes, and he ended up taking the kids shopping, right? What do you think about that approach?
Well, look, if somebody is a bully, there's something wrong with that kid, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's an adult or a kid, either one, there's something wrong with that kid. That is a damaged individual. And one of the things I've often talked about is when you hear about a bully, what you wanted to go do is, grab that kid and shake them till their teeth rattle. But the fact is, they're as damaged as the kid they're bullying, and you're not going to get a change if you don't treat the bully just like you do the kid. They're not as sympathetic as the person they're bullying, but they're as broken as the person they're bullying. And so somehow or another, you've got to get through to that bully. And when you look at the statistics about who does the bullying, that bullying has been modeled for them. They're either bullied in the home, and in the vast majority of the cases, there's violence in the home. They're getting boxed around, slapped around, yelled at, bullied in the home, and so they model that behavior in school or with their peers. So they're usually victims and perpetrators at one and the same time. So you've got to approach it from both ends. They're not as sympathetic, so people aren't motivated to do that, right. But they're going through the same things that they're putting on somebody else.
What advice do you give parents when their child is going to school, getting bullied, the school's not doing anything about it? What would you tell a parent to do, and what advice would they give their own child?
Well, the first thing I tell parents is not just wait until your kid's being bullied. Ask yourself, do you know if your kid's a bully? Mm-hmm. Because let me tell you, somebody's doing the bullying.
Absolutely.
So where are the parents of the bullies? You need to ask yourself, not just is my kid being bullied, but do I have a bully for a kid? Find out. And we teach that there are clues for that. There are red flags for that. Like if your kid's coming home with stuff he didn't leave with,
Extra money.
yeah, he's got lunch money he didn't leave with. He's got a
Sneakers,
jacket
a
he
bike.
didn't leave with.
Wait a minute, Dr.
Stuff
Phil.
like
He
that.
could be selling drugs.
He could be selling drugs, so it's not as bad as you thought, right? Yeah, but no, he's coming home with things. He has friends, and all of a sudden, one of them is marginalized. He's not there, and you hear them back there making jokes about him, or they're targeting this kid in some way. Then you need to step up and do something about that as a parent. And if your kid is being bullied, there are red flags for that too. If all of a sudden the kid's making a lot of excuses, doesn't want to go to school, he starts coming home, he's got marks on him, he's got stuff missing, his shirt's torn, whatever, he starts getting a lot of stomach aches, ambiguous symptoms, doesn't want to go to school, things like that. There are red flags for this. If you're a parent and you pay attention, you can find out if your kid's a bully or being bullied, and then you need to do something about it.
Question, I want to go back to Oprah real quick. Did you expect to get where you are after first appearing on her show? Like, did you see this?
No, I never had any intention of being on television. And I was very busy with a trial science firm when I met Oprah, and loved the career I was in, was very successful in several different ways, primarily loving what I was doing. I was very passionate about what I was doing and had no desire to be on television at all. And when they called to ask me to be on the show, I was on the show the night I represented her in the Mad Cow case up in Amarillo. Mm-hmm. I was on her defense team up there. And so the night the verdict came in, I was on the show that night. But then a few weeks later, a month later, they called and asked me to come be on the show because she'd made a commitment to her viewers. She said, look, anything I find in my life that I think is of real value, whether it's a hairdryer or an expert or anything, I'll share it with you. And she said I was one of those things she found in her life that was of value, so she wanted to share it with her viewers.
I can't wait till I get rich enough to be able to share other humans.
Yeah. She wanted to share the advice.
Oh, okay.
And they called and said, we want you to be on the show. And I said, no, that's okay. But I've got the name of 3 people that I think will do a really good job. And so I passed. And about 30 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was Oprah. And she says, you don't say no to Oprah. What are you good? Come on. Come be on the show. Wow. And I said, well, I'm going scuba diving. When they're doing it, I'm going scuba diving. She said, well, we'll wait till you get back. How's that? And I said, well, okay. So I went scuba diving, and I came back and went on the show. And I just basically said, look, I'm going to do what I do. And if y'all can cut that up into television, fine. And if you can't, okay. And so I just went and did what I did. And what they'll say, and the rest is history, I guess. It just kind of clicked, and people were pretty much in shock at first, to tell you the truth. They were pretty much in shock because I just kind of say what I think, and people were like, whoa. And so she said, I want you to come back. And I said, well, a lot of people were kind of in shock. What do you think? She said, you weren't as straight with them as you were with me, so turn up the heat. I said, they're already in shock. She said, I know, turn up the heat. And, deal with them the way you dealt with me. And so I said, okay. She said, you were kind of holding back. Just be honest, be yourself. And I did. And then I started doing Oprah every Tuesday for 5 years, and then did my own show after that.
Out of that whole story, I'm sitting here thinking, like, Oprah really calls people and says, you don't say no to Oprah? Now, in my mind, I always imagined that, but she actually said that?
Yeah, she was joking.
No, she wasn't.
Yes, she was.
No?
Yes, she was. Listen, I'd known her for 2.5 years at that point. We lived together in a bed and breakfast, the total trial team out in Amarillo, for like 2.5 months. She was like the extra sister I never wanted. I grew up with 3 sisters. So we knew each other really, really well. So she was calling, cutting up, saying, "Come on."
I feel like
Oprah? Wow.
I feel like she scolds you when you do stuff like Cash Me Outside, Girl and Treasure. I feel like she scolds you a little bit.
Well, you would be wrong.
What do you give Oprah for Christmas?
It's
Dr.
good
Phil?
to say, makes for good copy, but it ain't right.
It ain't happening.
No.
What do you give Oprah for Christmas?
We don't give each other gifts. We just make contact and talk and, wish each other Merry Christmas and we always talk birthdays and special days and stuff like that. But, we're in contact a lot. I probably talked to her 2 or 3 times in the last week or 10 days.
Do you think she changed your life for the better?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No question about it. Absolutely. She's. I think you meet 5. I think you meet 5 pivotal people in your life, and they can be pivotal in a good way. They can be pivotal in a bad way, or some of them are half and half.
Yeah.
Like my dad was a pivotal person in my life, half and half. He's a bad alcoholic, but he was also a role model as the hardest working man I've ever seen. So he was pivotal in. I haven't had a drink since I was 16. Because I saw what it did to him, so I just said, So he was very negative as an alcoholic, but very positive role model in working hard. So he was 50-50. And Oprah's been a very pivotal person in my life because she opened up a whole new arena and array that's created a whole different track in my life that I would have never gone down. I was very successful before I met her. But
You've said
it's a
that
whole
several times.
it's a whole different level of engagement with the world.
Do you think those are the best people, right? The people that see things in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself?
Yeah. And Oprah's do you know her?
I've met her. I've had the pleasure of meeting her once.
Yeah. She's really magnetic, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. 100%.
And if it wouldn't matter what role she was in. If you met her, you would remember her, whether she was working in a store or she was a teacher you had or whatever. You would remember that woman because she's got that spark. She's got that engagement.
I call her God's only begotten daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was your show successful from the first season?
Yes,
as soon as you started, because you had a nice build-up, 5 years. People were familiar with you.
Well, listen, when Oprah launches you, it's yours to lose, right? Because she gives you a good running start, right?
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah, we're going to let Dr. Phil go because I can see he's getting sick of this shit.
Yeah.
Listen, one more question. What did you think of Megyn Kelly's comments?
Why do you say that? I think I'm being very good here.
I can tell your body language says it all. I get it. You
said it didn't show. I want it's not showing.
This is radio. I mean,
go.
now you got a camera here. I got open body language here. I got a smile on my face. You're just very insecure.
We've been telling that for a long time.
What did you think of Megyn Kelly's comments about?
Well, I know Megyn Kelly very well, and I always look at people's intent, and I don't think that she had any negative intent at all. I think it was a poor choice of words. I think she'd take it back 1,000,000 times over, but I don't think she had any negative intent at all.
She should know better, though.
Well, of course.
Been so many conversations about this. It's
of
like,
course.
Come on, and especially what she does in her line of work. That's something that she should have been researched and known about instead of just
She's heard it before.
putting
She should have
something
known.
out there like that. So she should know better.
Of course. That's what I say. That's
Yeah.
a really last thing I always say before I ever walk out on live TV, and I do it like I did Colbert last night. The last thing I say before I walk on stage, I close my eyes and say, do not walk out there and say something stupid. That's the last thing I say before I walk out on television.
I thought you were about to say something real profound, like Dr. Wayne W. Dyer
Lord, help
quote.
me with this.
Yeah.
Don't say nothing stupid.
That's pretty profound for me. Do not say something stupid.
Well, Doc, we appreciate you for joining us.
No, I want to say something about the intention. Like, don't you think sometimes impact is greater than intention? Because I used to feel the same way. If as long as it's positive intent, it's cool. But sometimes you can have all the positive intention in the world, but the impact still may be negative.
Well, there's no doubt that impact is impact. There's no question about it. But I think it's a very low level of analysis if you ignore impacts. Like if somebody runs over your foot in the driveway and they didn't know your foot was there, That's different than if somebody swerves over and runs over your foot because they saw it there. One is responsibility, the other is blame. I'm going to blame the guy that swerved over there and ran over my foot, but I'm not going to blame somebody that ran over it accidentally and did not know it was there, right? There's a difference between blame and responsibility. And if you ignore the difference, then I think you're missing a very important aspect of what's going on. Your foot's still smashed, is what you're saying. Impact is impact. You still got a smashed foot. Now, they back up over that some bitch about 5 times. Now, okay, I'm pissed off, but you got to look at intent. If it's an accident, then so I do look at impact, but you have to look at intent as well, right?
You think she should have been fired? Or should be fired?
I don't know if she has been fired yet, has she?
They said it's coming any day now.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
But they said it wasn't just because of that. They said it was ratings and other situations.
Yeah, I think they are sorry they made the deal they made.
It wasn't going well anyway.
Yeah, so I think they're maybe looking for a reason, and she gave them one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Dr.
Every
Phil.
day, don't say
Thanks for
something
having
stupid.
me, guys.
All right, Dr. Phil.
He's ready to get rid of me here. I can tell. He's like,
I want to get you out of here if we say something stupid.
Yeah, get me out of here before I say something stupid. Hey, thanks for having me, man.
It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.